Hey guys, Matt. I have to re-upload chapter 25 on YouTube. The video manager, it said blocked in most countries. I think it said blocked in most countries. What? I thought I have to remove. I don't know why. I have to remove anything that potentially could be a copyrighted video. There's so much I'd like to do with certain videos. I just can't. I don't have much choice but to like read a book. I upload some old moon footage I thought is, in the public domain and blocked. So I'm taking everything but my own moon footage out and I'm just re-uploading. Also, I read this chapter more as the draft. I realize this chapter is way too much information, and when the book or the chapter goes final in the book, I'm gonna take about 25% out. There's just too much detail, too much verbiage in this chapter. It's too long, and I'm gonna try to get more to the point in chapters going forward. Hey guys, Matt, chapter 25. Remember, this is supposed to be for the newer individual. I know most people listening have been with me in the trenches for a very long time. So, this is a risk when you are presenting sections about the main elements of this world that everybody believes they know. We break them down as areas where people really don't know anything about anything that's presented, like the Statue of Liberty lie and all the other things I've been going through in the last few chapters. This is a risk for the new person when you're going to tell them that the moon is most likely something else. It's kind of a risk. So I am going to provide some images and a few videos over top instead of just the book cover. But remember, this is supposed to be read as a book. So is there any way in a verbal presentation here I can actually get people to actually maybe start to question that the moon might be something different than what they say it is? That's a tall task, but I'm going to try. I know most of you, even those that aren't going to agree with me, are big enough thinkers to keep almost anything on the table. Thanks. Chapter 25. What do you know about the moon? Oh no! What could this nut be thinking? What is he going to tell me about the moon? I'm afraid to keep reading. I've read all this way, and now he's going to go full out balls crazy on me. Yeah, you should be afraid. Be very afraid. The destruction of one's worldview is a terrifying thing. All I will say to start is, do you think I could have made sound arguments in the prior chapters, in all the preceding pages, and then right now I'm about to turn a madman? Did I just write this section sitting in a bathtub lathering myself with my own feces? You've heard the phrase, truth is crazier than fiction. Why is that statement now world famous? Because it's true. Reality is even more bizarre than what collectively is in this book. What's in this book, compared to the scheme of things, is a small section, just a small section of the craziness that's out your window. I don't go far enough in this book. Well, buckle up. Here's the moon discussion. Let's start small. Did you know there's no agreement on how the moon got up there? Ask the head of your local astronomy department at your local university, and then they'll tell you the moon is far too large a body for it to be explained as an orbiting rock. In other words, it's too big to have been captured by Earth's gravity. What? Surely astrophysicists at Oxford and Cambridge and Harvard and MIT, surely they agree on how the moon got up there. No, that's the point. There is no universal agreement. None. Remember what I said about research. If you find a NASA publication that explains to you how the moon got up there and the formation of the moon, and it explains all of this with a great deal of confidence, that doesn't mean that other experts agree with that NASA publication. NASA's not going to end an article about the moon with a bibliography list of all the other scientists who think their theory is total shit. It gets worse. A few astronomers have actually had the balls to say that there's more evidence that the moon should not exist than the fact that it does exist, if you want to do two sides of the scale, or two sides of the ledger. There's more you could list for reasons it should not exist, should not be there. A rock should never have been captured by Earth's gravity, blah, blah, blah. Much more in that list than the list you could put together as an astrophysicist that says it makes sense that it's there. Think of that before you call me crazy as I continue this discussion. Of course, all of this must have been before that famous landing that ended all dispute in the eyes of the people as to what the moon really is. The fake moon landing was intended to do just that. I'm still confused by the telephone call that President Nixon placed to Apollo 11 astronauts when a cell phone signal wasn't reliable in big cities until 2005. Sure, perhaps NASA had access to a 40 million megawatt gigawatt tower to beam the signal from President Nixon to the moon from Houston. But how did the voice of Buzz Aldrin return to Earth on the signal strength of about 8D batteries? Also, how did a Buzz Aldrin keep that dish perfectly aligned with Houston's receiving dish when the Earth is moving away at 60,000 miles per hour? If the return signal to President Nixon was so strong from Buzz holding his little dish up above his head on the moon, it was so strong that it just didn't have to find a little receiving dish. It just spread out over the entire Earth behind the power of 8D batteries. Then wouldn't you think that thousands of people all over the Earth, kids in their bedrooms listening on ham radios, could have picked up the signal and listened in on Buzzed? Like everything else, once you simply turn on your brain and think about these things for a few minutes in the right way, reality breaks down. Everything the system puts forth is designed to override common sense. Guys, let me go away from the book for a second because I think I made a really terrible mistake. Here's the deal. Remember, the moon's supposed to be about 230 degrees in the sun, like the inside of an oven. So they had those big air conditioning units on their back. And we know that here in the United States, a lot of big air conditioning units actually require a 210 line, not even a 110 outlet. So they must have had a bunch more D batteries powering the air conditioning units on their back so their blood didn't boil from the 220 degrees in the sun. Some Apollo missions actually collectively spent over 70 hours out in that sun. But it's amazing how I can't find D batteries to power my air conditioning units here on Earth. Nevertheless, they must have had a big generator that they set up on the moon, and they gassed it up and they pulled it and it started, it worked on the moon, a big generating unit with a 220 line. And they plugged their air conditioning units there, so whatever generator they were using to power all the air conditioning on the moon, this would have been the same power source that they could have plugged their transmitter. They could have plugged right in and then talked to Nixon using that. So when I said they only had 8D batteries going back to Nixon in that little conversation they had, I was wrong. They must have definitely plugged it in to whatever they used to power those air conditioning packs. Okay, let's get a little more serious. Let's stop and think about the ramifications of this section. No one knows with confidence how the moon even got up there. Even academia admits the moon should be far too large for Earth to have captured it in its gravity. Not understanding the basics about the moon is extremely strange considering our wondrous modern science and high technology. As science progresses, truth is forfeited to misdirection because we're told the technology is too advanced to be questioned. Combine that with some impossible math, and it can never be questioned by the likes of you and me. However, it doesn't matter how good my evidence is. The only way I have a chance of being taken seriously regarding what I'm about to say about the moon is if the reader goes into this section with the right frame of mind. The right perspective can only be brought forth by having a small preliminary conversation on the Egyptian pyramids. Think about how remarkable this is. Regarding the Great Pyramid of Giza, there is no understanding or consensus as to how it was built or they were built. There are just theories. Being so far away, the moon is pretty hard to study. We got theories, but we can't really reach out and experiment on it. But scientists can stand 10 feet away and look up at Kaifa, whatever the name is, look up at the Great Pyramid in Egypt in their lounge chair with a cold pina colada in their hand. And it's right in front of them, and they still have no idea how the hell it was constructed, and they're standing right next to it. They can go inside it. They can scan it with ultrasound and x-rays, and they still don't have a clue. Sorry, men with ropes can't drag 50-ton blocks 5 miles, let alone drag them for 50 miles and then put those blocks 400 feet up into the air. No, men with ropes can't do that. How is it possible the arrogant smarts of modern man can't explain this when it's right in front of them? It's very simple. Because the nature of your reality is something else. If the eggheads at Oxford and Cambridge can't explain the Great Pyramid, I'm certainly allowed then to offer counter viewpoints to NASA about the moon when the very same eggheads tell us that the moon orbiting the Earth should be impossible because of the relative mass of the Earth to the moon. They can't explain any of it, but they'll laugh at me, they'll mock me, and they'll ridicule me for what I'm about to say. Just thinking outside the box really isn't allowed anymore, is it? Just to finish up with the pyramids, there's many people that'll try to deliver the script that society has force-fed them with. There must be some information rolling around in the head of anybody new to all of this right now, listening or reading, meant to debunk conspiracy nuts like me on this topic. People are just dying to parrot forth and regurgitate the script that they've been given. Well, the Egyptian pharaohs didn't care about human life, and they had tens of thousands of slaves to do whatever they wanted. If they died on the job, then they didn't care. They could afford thousands of slaves, dragging each block with ropes to build the pyramids. That's wrong. Hitch 100 flies with dental floss to a cinder block. Can it carry the block like a helicopter? 100 flies? No. Can the flies drag the cinder block across the dirt hitched to their dental floss? No. There is no possible way for men to drag 20-ton to 50-ton blocks hundreds of feet into the air using ropes or anything else that we know as normal and understandable technology. Even if they use 10,000 slaves per block, which is ridiculous, how did they coordinate the slaves and their efforts? Did each slave master in charge of 100 workers as a subgroup of that larger group have a D battery-powered bullhorn and a walkie-talkie from Radio Shack so they could coordinate amongst each other and they could get orders from the master builder in the temple, which was Charlton Heston as Moses? Hooking up the ropes to that many men by itself would take all day.
Okay, everybody listen up now. Everybody listen up now. Can all the foremen, each foreman in charge of 100 slaves, can you hear me? Raise your right hand if you can hear me. There's 14 foremen on the right. I cannot see your hands. You must notify me if you can hear me. Okay. Now, when everybody hears the sound of my voice, for I am Moses, you will instruct your slaves to pull their ropes, all at the same time now, or we won't be able to move this 50-ton block. Foremen in groups D through J, you better pull your weight this time. You better get your slaves to work, or I'm going to feed you to the pit vipers personally. You hear me? I'll string you up by the balls.
Once again, all of our tendencies is to parrot the script we've been fed our entire lives instead of thinking hard about anything ourselves. Could it be that a conspiracy theorist is just someone who's actually looked into the wonders of the world and actually thought about them, instead of those parroting back what the masters of society have fed us? Regarding ancient Egypt, Easter Island, things like the Mayan calendar, and other ancient wonders, the powers that be in this world, and we're replacing that name, maybe we'll use penguins, know very little about these amazing things. But they put on a big show in front of the common man, so he or she thinks they know a lot. The message of academia must always be delivered with a fake confidence and a fake bravado. Don't worry your little heads. Smart men with letters on their business cards from Harvard and Oxford are in control here. Don't you little peasants worry your pea brains and walnut heads about these complicated things. These scientists are fish in the tank who have an excellent understanding of how the bubbles blow the lid off the pirate chest and how the pirate chest lifts up and down. But how useful is that if they have no concept of the Pacific Ocean? Did you know how many ancient texts speak about a time when there was no moon in the sky? It's actually documented in ancient texts. Now, I haven't read them, they're not in my drawer here, but I've heard a lot of people talk about a time when there was no moon in the sky, a moon not there, and then some records say it just appeared. Those primitive cultures, those assholes can't be believed. What do they know? Sure. And when the long count of the Mayan calendar just happened to end on the exact day of the winter solstice, December 21, 2012, after recording almost 2 million days to perfection, the fools in loincloths probably just got lucky. It doesn't matter what says, or what the eggheads say. Are you starting to understand that you have the brains and you have the authority, even the duty, to question it yourself? What are all those round holes of various sizes all over the moon? Go ahead, it's all very obvious if you just parrot the script of what you've been told while keeping the brain switched to the off position. Those round holes are impact craters, of course, from meteors. Really? Then why are they all perfectly round? Round means the meteor must have come straight down. Thousands of meteors just happen to hit coming perfectly straight down on a 90-degree angle, perpendicular to the moon's surface time after time for tens of millions of years, not one deviated course, not one meteor or meteorite. I guess there's no atmosphere, so it must be just a meteor. Nothing came from the side or at a low trajectory angle, leaving a long impact trail across the surface, like the way that crater was left from. Well, no, Flight 93 came straight down and went right into a strip mine. That's why there was no plane wreckage. But let me get back to the point. Think about this. How could all those craters be perfect circles with no long trails? If the moon gets pummeled regularly by thousands of meteors, why are there no images in the history of video and telescopes back to like 1950 of one of these objects hitting the moon? Forget science. There should be at least one person in the last 1,000 years who has written about a disturbance on the moon or noticed a change in its appearance from an impact. Or what should be a full moon, there was some farmer 400 years ago wrote about a haze over the moon. Even any little bit of evidence like that would give some sort of indication it was actually struck by a meteor. There should be something recorded somewhere, but we don't have a single story. We don't even have a single drunken farmer who wrote about walking out into his field one night and seeing something strange. No, everybody for millions of years have walked out, looked up at that moon, well, assuming it's been here. Maybe the moon is newer. I have no evidence on that one way or another, except the stories that say perhaps the moon was not here and one day it's here. However long you want to go back, during a full moon, no one has ever gone out and witnessed the moon being anything other than absolutely crystal clear. Regarding things striking the Earth, we've been told since second grade that one small meteorite the size of the Superdome, small relatively from the cosmic sense, the size of the Superdome hitting Earth would carry the force of tens of thousands of nuclear bombs and would send so much debris up into the atmosphere it would kill off all of our pet dinosaurs. We know from the fake One Small Step for Man movie that played in 1969, the moon's surface is about 3 inches of dust. And it's like fine particulate. As a kid, you ever stick your hand in your mom's flour jar and ooh, that feels kind of soft and nice. Well, wasn't that what they told us the moon's surface was? So even a bowling ball impacting the moon's surface at a few thousand miles an hour would produce like some giant dust cloud the size of Texas over the moon. We'd go out moon cycle after moon cycle, and instead of being crystal clear all the time, it would be hazy because something struck it. All that particulate from that footprint was thrown up into the air, and the news would be reporting, well, it's going to take another few moon cycles for that haze to clear. We're going to have another hazy moon night. No, it's always crystal clear, always. But it gets pummeled with meteors. How do you reconcile those two things? You can't. Going away from the book for a second, sure, if you go to YouTube, NASA somewhere they'll show you, they'll say this is an image we actually have of something striking the moon. They'll show you something. It's so poor, it's so badly done, it's so fake. There's nothing there. NASA should have what? 30 high definition cameras pointed at the moon for the last 40 years. They should show you 30 years ago, 20 years ago, images of strikes, images of things coming in, clear. You go to YouTube now, they'll show you something. It's something I could pretty much produce in my backyard with my old Radio Shack equipment. It's ridiculous. Hey, Matt, let me step in here, you author. You think you're some kind of author. You're just an asshole. These impacts, they happen over billions and billions of years, you dope. You make it sound like every time somebody looks up, there should be something hitting the moon. There should be one a week. Okay, fine. Maybe not one a week, but impacts on the moon should be very regular. Let me remind you, genius, we have something here on Earth all the time called meteor showers. Most meteor showers are even announced in advance on your local news. You can turn on the local news and look up in the sky tonight. We're expecting a meteor shower, but if you're outside between midnight and 2 a.m., you'll see. They say it all the time. I've seen it myself. One can go outside and see many, many shooting stars, hundreds on some nights, burning up in the atmosphere. No matter who knows what's going on, but that's not the purpose of this video. The moon has no atmosphere, no protection. Meteorites and meteor showers should also hit the moon with regularity, as they do here on Earth. They don't. This should also lead one to wonder how the astronauts sleep easy on the International Space Station, the ISS, knowing there are hundreds and hundreds of rocks daily flying down upon them towards the Earth from deep space, and if not daily, a few times a week, and perhaps thousands of small objects coming at them if we have a recorded meteor shower. We're told just one little tiny object hitting the size or the side of the ISS at 10,000 miles per hour would kill everybody on board instantly. So sleep tight, big hair-sprayed women of the ISS. Sleep tight. How do you get the stress level on that thing should be off the charts, but all we see are shiny, happy people playing guitars and wearing gorilla suits. If the Earth gets a meteor shower, why doesn't the moon get a meteor shower? If the moon got just one meteor shower, the dust kicked up on the surface, according to that famous footprint that Neil Armstrong showed us or was recorded by Buzz Aldrin, just one meteor shower, the dust kicked up would be visible with the naked eye from Earth. Every time we look up, what do we see? A crystal clear moon. If I'm wrong about this, and I'm overestimating that what can be, what actually can be seen with the naked eye, well, surely the kid next door with his Radio Shack telescope would be able to capture the impacts on the moon and get a few hits recorded himself. And NASA maybe could have done this over the last 30 or 40 years. These pictures do not exist. NASA should have thousands of HD images of the moon getting hit with something. Thousands. If not from satellites, what are they doing? Why are they all pointed at the Earth? Point one towards the moon. If not from satellites, then from all the observatories across all the gin joints and all the states in the United States, from the observatory that I'm sure exists at Harvard, all the way to the Griffith Observatory in Los Angeles, all pointing their telescopes up. There should be thousands and thousands of pictures and videos of things hitting the moon. We basically have nothing. These accounts do not exist. We only see one side of the moon. When they say the dark side of the moon, that's because we only see one face. For millions of years, only see that one face. Never see the other side. But that doesn't mean the moon does not rotate. Now, guys, I have to pause. I'm making certain assumptions here as to how the solar system works, what heavenly bodies actually are, based on what they tell us. I can't have a sidebar conversation. This isn't a flat earth discussion. That's not the point here. I have to use their own assumptions essentially against them. So don't freak out if I say something that goes against the religion. Okay, so we only see one side of the moon. But it does rotate, they say. So its rotation, though, is so perfectly aligned with Earth's movement, we only get to see one face of the moon. Most people don't realize that. For millions of years, we only see one face. But people don't realize, oh, it must be fixed. No, it's rotating, they tell us. But it's rotating at exactly the way the Earth is moving. Basically, what I'm saying is, it's another 1 in a billion coincidence or a 1 in 10 billion coincidence. For this reason, we only see one part of the moon for millions and millions and millions of years. What Jesus looked up and saw, you see. Now, the chances of this phenomenon occurring, as I said, is infinitesimally small. And when something, when it crosses your threshold, as to what are the chances, then likely you have to abandon what they're telling us is actually happening. If the moon's rotation is so perfect as to only allow one face of the moon to point towards Earth, basically forever, how does that face have thousands of craters on it if that face is protected by the Earth itself? See what I'm saying? If you extend your hand out and open your palm up and point it right towards your nose, and then move your palm around your head in the same angle as the moon, so your eyes always just see the palm, your eyes never see the back of your hand, then how are meteorites flying around your room going to hit the face of the moon, or going to hit your palm at a 90-degree angle because your head's in the way? Any meteor that would be able to hit the moon on a 90-degree angle, perfectly straight down, that would cause a circular crater, would be protected by the Earth. The Earth's gravity aren't we told, would pull the meteor in. So all of it just doesn't make any sense. It all starts to break down when you look at it closely. Guys, there are YouTube videos that does address this. Why people say that the craters are perfectly round, and how is that possible if meteors must be coming in at various angles? Wouldn't the rock come in low and then create a big huge gash across the moon? Why are all the craters round? They do address this, and they do a pretty good job for the newbie who's just trying to come out of the funk. Somebody goes, well, my friend's a conspiracy theorist and he mentioned this, so I'm going to go research it on my own, and they will find these videos. And to me and you, they don't make any sense, but they're enough to convince the newbie that, of course, Don Lemon is still correct and we're crazy. Basically what they say, don't even bother with them, but I'll sum up what they say. The energy coming in from these meteors on an angle is so great that it's basically like an explosion happens when it hits the moon's surface. Comes in low, and instead of a rock hitting and gashing across the moon, it's like the force of a nuclear explosion. It just explodes outward and equally in each direction. It's absurd, okay? Absurd. In a no atmosphere environment, if a rock comes in low into a dusty surface, okay, it's going to gash in the direction it flies in at. It's the force, the overwhelming force of the impact is going to be such that the explosion backwards, the way it came, is going to equal the explosion forward. And the explosion backward is going to go against all of the momentum coming in. That's the way they explain it. And for anybody questioning we conspiracy theorists, they do a decent enough job where most people would walk away saying, yeah, NASA's still correct, Don Lemon's still correct. To us, it's nonsensical. No, it can't explode backwards against its momentum. There would be at least a mini gash in the direction of its momentum. Switch gears. What causes ocean tides? Sure, that's easy. We learned that in first grade, the moon's gravity. Can you tell me then why the moon's gravity does not affect one lake, river, or stream on this planet? Billions of gallons in the ocean is pulled and pushed and sloshed around 15 feet up and 15 feet down, back and forth. Billions of gallons, probably trillions. And Lake Michigan doesn't move an inch? Why isn't just water in a glass affected, or your above ground pool? How can it be easier for the moon to move the trillions of pounds of the Pacific Ocean than to move water in a Dixie cup? Training with Yoda, Luke could move a rock with his mind, but he couldn't move his big X-Wing fighter. Wasn't it too big? The moon, I guess, works the opposite way. It can move the Atlantic Ocean, but it has no ability to pull on a melted popsicle. Well, if that's the case, Matt, obviously it must have something to do with the salt in the ocean. So it has the salt, it pulls the salt. You're just making that up to fit the narrative. We're told the moon's gravity pulls the water. Last time I checked, you don't need to rub salt all over yourself to be affected by gravity. Gravity, the way they explain it, is one large object pulling another object, and they say gravity. How would the salt be necessary? Guys, let me go away from the book again for a second. They have an answer for everything. No matter what we notice as an anomaly, they have an answer for everything. And they build their answers on backtracking and covering themselves. This is another example. You research this, they'll talk about a combined center of gravity between the Earth and the Moon. They'll talk about there are tides certainly in your bathtub, and there are tides in lakes and rivers, but they're so infinitesimally small because those bodies of water are so small compared to the oceans. You just don't notice it. You just can't measure it. And even there could be a tide on a lake and the wind blowing the other direction will nullify it. And they'll talk about the Earth's rotation and a sloshing around effect. Now, they have an answer for everything, just like they're backtracking now, saying the moon is inside Earth's atmosphere, trace atmosphere. Now, people are just coming across those articles now. I think those old articles are pretty old. But all of it is meant to backtrack, in my opinion, or cover their butts. So again, let's just use common sense with gravity. Why? Well, if it pulls gigantic oceans. First, let me just pause and say one thing, guys. I don't know how many people have ever been on the coast and know much about tides, but if you're on the Jersey Shore where I grew up and you're on a dock, and low tide, I mean high tide, the water is almost coming up through the dock. Low tide, the water is pulled out so much. Under the dock is just mud. It's not like a tide, it comes up a foot and it goes down 8 or 9 inches. I mean, the tide goes out and it is just, there's no water under the dock. It's just mud for 30, 40 feet. Look at those inlets in the UK. The ships are on mud at low tide. There's no water at all in the inlet. And then the tides come back. So we're talking about something incredibly significant. And we've always been told it was because of gravity. If that's the case, we would be like, can I take a bath? I don't think I can because the moon is such, it's going to just whip all the water out of my bathtub. Well, the effect of gravity on a smaller object, we've always been told per their own rules, is more dominant than on a larger object. A small object going towards Jupiter is sucked in immediately. A gigantic planet going by Jupiter is going to be slightly affected. Is it that they just contradict themselves constantly, and the answers they put on YouTube and on Google are just good enough so the people that research them say, my buddy Matt, he's wrong. So call me nuts, but my conclusion is just the opposite. The common sense conclusion is just the opposite. That if the moon's gravity pulls trillions and trillions of tons of ocean, 50, 60, 100 feet, so much so that the dock underneath you is just all shells and mud, then if you went to take a bath at the wrong time or you poured a glass of water, it would whip the water right out. The gravitational effect on a small body should be much more than on a large body. It just doesn't make any sense. It does not make any sense as usual. Here's another moon anomaly. From your perspective on Earth, during a solar eclipse, the moon and the sun appear to be exactly the same size from your perspective. However, if the moon is 2,500 miles in diameter, how does it produce a tiny little shadow on the Earth in totality, called the umbra, only 70 miles wide? When a massive, let me back up a second. Most people listening are aware of that, but the moon, 2,500 miles across, the shadow, the full shadow on Earth is only 70 miles. How? When a massive fluffy cloud passes overhead on the days where that used to actually be possible, and that cloud blocks the sun, does a shadow the size of a basketball roll over you while you're sleeping on the beach? Do large objects that block the sun, like clouds up in the sky, produce tiny little shadows? No. In fact, shadows work the opposite way. If you place a quarter on a desk and you switch on the light directly above the quarter, as you pick up the quarter and pull it away and up from the desk, the outline of its shadow is always the same size as the object, or it actually gets larger as it moves away or up from the ground or up from the desk. It's the same or it gets larger. The shadow never gets smaller as the object pulls away from the surface that's accepting the shadow, for example. If a low-flying plane casts a shadow on the ground, that shadow can only be the same size as the plane or larger. It can never be smaller than the plane. However, that's what the moon does during an eclipse. To me, this is yet another reality breakdown. Now, not in those listening, but this is the script that's just dying to come forth in anybody else you would tell this information to. They'll try to give you a big, intelligent lesson about the difference between penumbra and umbra and how I don't understand what shadow is. Penumbra is dimming, okay? There's shadow cast during a solar eclipse, and then there's dimming. If you go into your living room, find a lamp, take the lampshade off, there's just a bare bulb. If you tape part of the bulb, turn the light on, tape part of the bulb with duct tape, there's a dimming. Of course, the light is not going to be as bright in the living room if you tape over part of it. That's penumbra. Penumbra, that's a dimming. It's not shadow. There's a difference. The shadow is umbra, the 70-mile little tiny circle that everybody in their camper, tries to get in and follow the eclipse across the country. That's shadow. And per the Batman rule of shadows and the League of Shadows, it can never be smaller than the object itself. Okay, Matt, I've been listening to your dumb book. You've gone too far in this case. What are you saying? The authorities, the entire news, the entire government is less informed than you are, sitting there whacking yourself off with your sweatshirt on in your bedroom. They're all lying to us or misinformed. And obviously you, as a peon with no big title, you obviously must be missing something. Did you ever consider that, Matt? Your argument makes sense, but you must be missing something. You've got to be missing something. Well, yeah, that's kind of the point. If I'm not missing something, reality as you know it kind of breaks down. Yeah, I must be missing something, for if I'm not, then anybody listening to this is truly Neo about to come forth from his or her pod, and the world you think you know does not exist. Look, I don't care what any authority says. I know how shadows work. So do you. Go ahead. Spend the rest of your life putting different sized objects between a light source and a white wall. Call me up the first time an object casts a tiny little shadow 1/100th its size. Go ahead. I can be reached at the original Obamacare phone number, by the way, which you know is 1-800-FU. You assume the people in control of this world are just like you are. Trust me. They're not like you are. When you get a glimpse as to who they are and what they want and what their agendas are, you will understand why you've been lied to. You've been brainwashed into thinking these concepts are complicated, and you have no right to consider them or question them. When you can put aside that script, you can see that all of this is very simple. You see that their official explanation of almost everything makes no friggin' sense. No object casts a tiny shadow as it moves away from a surface or the surface hosting that shadow. There are even more impossible moon anomalies. With the moon, they just keep coming and coming and coming. The brightness of the moon, however you measure brightness, in lumens, the brightness of the full moon is consistent across its entire face. That should be impossible for a sphere. If you consider the full moon to be a pie, every slice is the same brightness. Also, the crust of each piece is as bright as the first bite you would take, or the point in the center. The outer edge, the same brightness as the center. If the moon is a round sphere of rock, that's not possible. If you look up at the full moon, the light intensity on the outer edge is always the exact same as it is near the center. It's the same throughout. If the moon is a globe like a basketball, this can't be. Because of angles, the outer edges of a sphere 250,000 miles away can't possibly reflect back the same amount of light to an observer in the same intensity. The point on the globe or sphere that's closest to the observer would be more flat and would be brighter. It would have to be. The part of a round sphere closest to the person looking at it would always be the center of the object, which creates essentially on a large object a flat surface that will reflect the most sun rays back toward the observer. The edges of a sphere would be both farther away from the observer and create impossible angles that would cast the light away from the observer. In summary, the edges of the full moon would be essentially darkened, at least extremely dim. From an observer's perspective on Earth, sunlight hitting the outer edges per simple angles are deflected away from the Earth. not into somebody's eye. If you need another example, imagine shining a flashlight at a mirror on a wall in front of you. If the flashlight's bright enough and you have the angle of the mirror right, it can almost blind you, coming right back into your eye. And what if you shined your flashlight at the mirror in front of you, but the angle of the mirror was completely turned or facing off to 8 o'clock? Technically, no light would find its way back to you at all. The angles at the edges of a sphere point away from you. The edges of the moon should be much, much darker than the center. They're not even dim. It's the exact same brightness. This early on, are you strong enough to see it? Are you still looking for society's script to validate your worldview? Are you still looking to see what Don Lemon would say about such things? The moon is simply this. It's not what they say it is. I don't know what it is. But simple presentations like this prove it's just not what they say it is. Once you know that, put anything on the table. Anything has merit. If this can be demonstrated, the moon is not what they say it is, your entire reality in every area breaks down. If anything about the moon is not what they told you, you can throw out absolutely everything you know about everything in this world and start over. Once the first fish in the fish tank says, guys, I think this is a tank. I don't think this is the extent of the universe. Then everything else they've ever learned in the tank goes bye-bye. Also, regarding the sheer brightness of the moon, the intensity or the luminosity should be impossible. In that movie they made from 1969, didn't Apollo astronauts show us the surface of the moon is dark dust and fine particulate? Scientifically, that's very much like a cat litter box. I don't think it takes 6 months of experiments at Cambridge to know that a cat box isn't a great reflector of light. On some nights, the moon is so bright it can light up a field where one can easily see for a half-mile down the road if the ground is covered in snow. One can easily read a book in the light of a full moon unobstructed by clouds. This incredibly bright illumination is not possible if the moon is dark dust like they say. The Bible called it a lesser light, which implies it is not a reflector of sunlight, but produces its own light. I'm much more inclined to believe the moon produces its own light versus anything that NASA says. Their logo is a forked tongue, for crying out loud. I'm not even kidding. I'm sure you all realize that, the people listening. What I presented was indisputable physical evidence. A pile of dust can't reflect light so bright from 250,000 miles away it initially hurts your eyes until they adjust. Sure, it goes against Wikipedia, backed up by all of science. No doubt to you, I must be missing something. You will have a better understanding of this reality construct by the book's end. Well, that's written for the newbie. The people listening to this already do. What the hell are you suggesting here, Matt? You're either 3 sheets to the wind or nuts. It's obviously reflecting sunlight, you dope. How the hell else would it wax and wane as it changes positions relative to the sun over the course of a month? A-hole. Of course. I agree. That makes sense. I'm well aware that it waxes and wanes. I live on this earth and I understand that information. I'm able to look up from my cell phone every once in a while and see that phenomenon. One area where we agree does not mean all that I just presented has no merit. How do you explain what was just discussed? Because it waxes and wanes? How does that dismiss every anomaly that I just laid out? Because of everything I just spoke about, I'm the first one to stand up and admit I don't know what the moon is or what it's all about. I know what it's not. I know it's not exactly what they say it is. I don't know what it is. I admit the unknown thing waxes and wanes. So what? So what? But see, with most people, if just as a conspiracy theorist, if just one part of your argument they don't really buy into, or you can't explain every part of the who, what, when, where, why, and how. You just can't get all 6. You have 5 elements, but you don't have 6. That's all they need to dismiss everything you've ever said. Just make one mistake. That's all they need to latch on to dismiss everything. That's how desperate they are under their mind control to hold on to Don Lemon's worldview. Here's yet another one. On a sunny blue day, as rare as that is anymore, we can all see a full moon right in the middle of the day. If the moon is 250,000 miles away and is made up of the stuff of a cat litter box, there is no way we should be able to see it on a sunny day, in the middle of a sunny day in bright blue. We can't see stars on sunny days, can we? And that's something those stars supposedly generate 100 million nuclear explosions per half second. But we can see light bouncing off a cat litter box at 2 o'clock in the afternoon in the sunny blue. How does the light reflecting off the moon find its way through the brightness of the blue sky into your eyes? What's so special about those rays of light bouncing off the face of that cat box where they can outcompete a sunny blue sky? Yes, we can see lots of things in the sky on a sunny day, like a baseball flying out of the park or a helicopter circling overhead. The point is, whatever the moon is, it must be far closer to Earth than we're told, or we would never be able to see it on a sunny day. There's simply no way for sunlight that can reflect off a dirty cat box 200,000 plus miles out in the blackness of space, and for the light to find its way all the way to your eyes, through all the blackness of space, and then through the bright blue sky. We can't see Sirius, can we? We can only see Venus under ideal conditions. We can't see Orion's belt. We can't see anything else, but we can see the moon clearly on a sunny day. For discussion's sake, let's just say that after Apollo 11, crazy old Buzz reported the moon was some sort of mirror with diamond-like rocks on the surface. It wasn't what they thought. It wasn't dust like a cat box. It was covered in John Travolta disco balls. If that was the case, I wouldn't be putting this argument forth. I would say something that reflective maybe could send light to our eyes on a sunny day if it was full of John Travolta Saturday Night Fever edition disco balls. But that's not what they tell us, is it? They tell us the moon is not even a reflecting body of any significance that would reflect anything. They say it's like a cat box. Even on a clear night, the full moon should look like a rocky, kind of dim, I don't know, you should barely be able to see it, even at night, because it's just dust reflecting light. Even on a clear night with no chemtrails, the moon should look like a rock in your hand, lit up by a single firefly. It shouldn't be a lesser light, a biblical comparison to the sun itself. It should be very, very dark and dim, if all of what they say is true. And let me mention it one more time. Now they tell us the moon is in the Earth's atmosphere, or trace atmosphere. Absolute backpedaling, validation to anybody that's ever looked up at the moon and said that thing's local. There's no way that thing is 200,000 plus miles away. It's right there. Is a jet going to crash into it? No, but it's local. And the whole story about it's in the Earth's atmosphere or trace atmosphere is just backpedaling, or it's trying to throw a karma get out of jail free card. Finally, guys, let me address this off to the side. Last night was a full moon, and as I looked out my window at about 3 in the morning, the house itself casts a tremendous shadow. Everything in the forest is lit up, but every tree casts a shadow. It is, in this sense, truly a lesser light, because the things that get in the way of it in the ground, there's a shadow cast. Very, very distinct shadow. A lot of people aren't really aware of that. And a lot of people don't go out at night or really observe. But the point is, a lot of people have done experiments that say the moonlight is actually cooler than sunlight. It's a light of a different nature, or a light coming from a different source. So, for example, their driveway, half might be in the moonlight. Very bright, very lit up. You could almost read under it, under a full moon. But part of the driveway may be in shade, may be completely dark, blocked. Say a big building is between the moonlight and the driveway. And they take their laser sensor and they point it at the moonlight, or the part of the driveway that's lit up. And if it's lit up, you would think, well, it's got to be warmer. It's lit up, and they'd say, oh, the temperature of the driveway is 40 degrees. And then they'll go over and point it to a dark part of the driveway where the light of the moon is blocked by a big building, and it'll say, well, that's let me make sure I get this right. I'm gonna mess this up. That's 43 degrees, or 42 degrees, or 44 degrees. Well, wait a second. The part of the driveway where at least some light is reflecting onto it is cooler or colder than the part of the driveway that's getting zero light, that essentially it would be in pitch black if it wasn't for the reflective light all around. That's just not possible. But again, the people conducting these experiments, they're very it's not very scientific. I would love to see somebody conduct a very controlled scientific measurement of this. And I think Jeranism tried, and I didn't like the way he conducted the experiment. He did not confirm what we've all heard, or at least in this section. He did not confirm that moonlight is cooler, but a lot of people have, and I can't use it as evidence, but we're keeping it on the table for now. So in total, I just outlined 6 ways that essentially proves the moon is not what they say it is. When the official story breaks down, then all other possibilities are put back on the table, including what you think it is, including, of course, the biblical suggestion or interpretation that the moon is a lesser light and casts its own light. It's not just Genesis. These books and verses in the Bible also suggest the moon creates its own light. Job 25:5, Isaiah 13:10, Isaiah 30:26, Ezekiel 32:7, Mark 13:24. Guys, just to go away from the book, I'm going to wrap up this section on the moon. I'm not using the lunar wave as evidence. I can't. No matter what you believe Crow 777 is, or other people apparently have filmed this very strange liquid-like wave going over the moon, I can't use it as evidence. What do we have? We have a few people saying they filmed something. Well, if it was my cousin or my uncle or my father, I have no reason to believe them or not believe them. You can't use that as evidence. Okay? It's interesting. I watch the videos, but I'm not just going to take somebody's word for it. Somebody who I don't know who their real name is, and I've never seen them, I've never talked to them. No, cannot be used as evidence. But we don't need to. The two things that before I was neck deep in this conspiracy stuff, remember I kind of pointed out in this video or reading from the book that it actually can hurt your eyes, and it did do that once, and it really started to wake me up years ago. I guess inside my house was very dark, and I went outside, and it was just one of those super moons. Everything was crystal clear, no chemtrails. And if your eyes are not adjusted to it, and you're in a dark room, and you look up at the moon, you almost, I've done this before, have to squint. It hurts to a degree, hurts your eyes, meaning your eyes really have to adjust, or the effect of like when you turn the bathroom lights on in the middle of the night, you can't see anything. Now, that's just not possible from a rock in space, 200 and some thousand miles out, like a cat box and dusty, 3 inches of dust. It's just not, it couldn't reflect that level of intensity. And even before I was involved in all this, I went, what? I have to squint? And now when I look at the moon, the other thing that just strikes me, now that our minds are open to considering all the different possibilities and we're closed off to nothing, just the full moon last night, I look up at it when it's clear, and it's just right there. It's local. I mean, what does local mean? I don't know, but it's not 200 plus thousand miles away. My eyesight's not even good, and you can make out detail. I mean, I wonder what the moon looks like to somebody that has perfect 20/20 vision or better. I mean, making out details with the naked eye on some rock with dust 200,000 miles out, it's just right there. If you allow yourself to be open to it, you just look up at a full moon, and it's not far away. It's just right there. And then they come out saying it's in our atmosphere, and that backpedaling. Guys, I mean, this is just more mind-boggling stuff, and I know this one got a little bit long, but thanks for sticking with me.